morning, everyone, and welcome to one of the stranger and more unique and more interesting corners of Colorado. I'm standing on top of a tower called the Crestone Zigurrat. The town of Crestone is over here somewhere. It's a small town with a population of less than 200. And I'm at the foot of the beautiful Sangre de Cristo Mountains. That means blood of Christ in Spanish. Now, this mountain right here is Crestone Needle. That is one of Colorado's 54 or 55 14,000 foot peaks, or 14ers. There's another one called Crestone Peak that's just over here that we can't quite see from the ziggurat. It's just after sunrise and it is very windy, so forgive any wind noise. We are about, 30 feet from this fence right here. This fence marks the boundary of Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve. So all of this is Great Sand Dunes National Park. In fact, we can see the sand dunes from here. If we zoom in, those are the dunes with their early morning light, beautiful sunrise light shining on the dunes with more beautiful mountains. And this little wonder behind me was built in the late 70s by Najib Halabi Jr., who was an American aviator and chairman of Pan Am at one point. And he built this as a place of worship and of prayer and of contemplation, of meditation. He was originally from Syria. Well, he was born in America, but his dad was originally from Syria. And ziggurats are Mesopotamian step pyramids, basically. They were holy places where the gods were believed to live. And so he built this, and it's now a place that's open from sunrise to sunset. And I love it. What a beautiful little structure sitting on a hill overlooking much of the San Luis Valley. This valley is, if you look at a map of Colorado, this valley, this large high elevation valley, is sort of a hole in the southern middle portion of the map. It's bounded on one side, again, by the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and on the other side we have the beginnings over there of the San Juan Mountains. Our next stop is up against the mountains. We can just barely see it from here. It's hard to see because it's far away, and also the sun is shining kind of directly in our faces. But that little white cone-shaped structure right in the middle is where we're headed to next. But before we get over there, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of this particular corner of the San Luis Valley. So you can see probably some houses over here, some buildings over here, and there are more in the flatter parts of the valley over here. This area is called the Baca Grande, and it's a planned community dating back to the 70s. So at that time, in the early 70s, this area was acquired by the Arizona-Colorado Land and Cattle Company. And the head of that company was a man whose name I don't remember. I'll put it on the screen here. But he and his wife came here. I'll put her name on the screen too. And the wife was visited by a local mystic or prophet. And this prophet said that this area would be a center of spiritual learning at some point in the future. And so to kind of fulfill that prophecy, that couple donated several tracts of land here to various religious and spiritual organizations around the world. And so today, that's why we have stuff like this. That's why we have stuff like where we're going next here today. There are in this area several buildings and centers of various religious beliefs around the world. And that's what this area is known for. That's why this somewhat obscure area is such a spiritual hot spot, let's say, for lack of a better phrase. But originally this land was given to the family of Cabeza de Vaca, who was a Spanish explorer And famously, he was shipwrecked, I think on the coast of Texas, and spent 8 years wandering the Southwest before he reunited with the Spanish in Mexico. And so in exchange for his loyalty, his service to the king granted his family thousands of acres of land in New Mexico. When that land became part of the United States, I think I have this all right, this is kind of complicated, so bear with me here. The government wanted to take that land that had been awarded to the Cabeza de Vaca descendants. They wanted to use that land and develop it into the town of what is now Las Vegas, New Mexico. And so in exchange for that land grant, the family was given this area, this land grant. And so it passed down through the family, and eventually it was sold to some individuals, and then eventually that Arizona, Colorado Land and Cattle Company bought it. So really, really interesting history. And so that's why this area is called the Baca Grande. Vaca, Baca, it's kind of the same sound in Spanish, the V and the B. It's named after the Cabeza de Vaca family. Originally, this land was home to the Ute tribes, the Ute Native American tribes, and when the Spanish were in control of New Mexico, which is just a little bit south of here, they tried to colonize this area, but the Ute tribes kept attacking them. And going back to the name of this mountain range here, the Sangre de Cristos, apparently that name comes from a priest who was dying. He was attacked by the Utes and he was dying, and as he was dying he saw the sun set on these mountains, and the sun kind of lit up the mountains, turned them red, and he said with his dying breath, his last words were Sangre de Cristo, or blood of Christ, because of the blood red sun shining on the mountains. I thought that was a great story. Okay guys, let's pack this up, let's drive. I think we have a little bit of driving to do on a somewhat sketchy, somewhat bumpy road to that white cone-shaped tower. This is a stupa. More specifically, this is called Tashi Gomang Stupa. And stupas are important structures in Tibetan Buddhism. I've seen a lot of them in Nepal, in the Himalayas. You'll see a lot of them along with prayer flags like we see here. And this one in particular was built to commemorate a very important religious leader. There's a little information kiosk here, and there's a picture of that religious leader. This is His Holiness the 16th Karmapa. He passed away in 1981, but he was essentially the equivalent of the Dalai Lama of this particular branch of Tibetan Buddhism. He was born in Tibet, but he left Tibet to flee after the Chinese occupation. And so after he left, he was just a very important, very beloved spiritual leader of that branch of Buddhism. He visited this area, and that's why there is this stupa here. He came here and he said he had a vision that this place, this area would be a center, a home of Tibetan Buddhism teaching and learning. Stupas often contain relics of saints, and that is the case with this one. There are possessions of His Holiness that are buried within here. These are not buildings that you can enter, but inside of these are a bunch of things. So relics, first of all, there are 100,000, I think they're called tsatsas or something similar to that, which are little mini representations of stupas, like mini clay stupas filled with prayer rolls and meditations. So that's all in here. Juniper is inside of here, all sorts of stuff. I'll put a list on the screen if I can find it. This particular stupa was consecrated on July 6th, 1996. And the shape of stupas in general evoke the Buddha sitting with his crown on a throne as he meditates and reaches enlightenment. Here's the front of the stupa with an inset statue of His Holiness right there. In Tibetan Buddhism, there are various kinds of stupas, and Tashi Gomang stupa means stupa of many auspicious doors, and that represents the 84,000 different paths to enlightenment that the Buddha himself taught, and the stupa itself is covered in these small doors. Stupas are always walked around or circumambulated clockwise, and this is done for various reasons: to focus the mind, to show devotion, to accrue merit in this life. And it's done not only with stupas, but also various other holy places. Like there's a mountain in Tibet, a famous mountain called Mount Kailas, and Tibetan Buddhists will make a pilgrimage to that spot and circumambulate that mountain for the same reasons. Prayer flags famously have prayers written on them, and every time they flap in the wind, that prayer is offered up. And the same is true for prayer wheels. There's a prayer written on there, and every time it's spun, that prayer is offered up. What a beautiful and fun and unique little spot to have in a random place in southern Colorado. And it reminded me a lot of my time in Nepal. I've spent a few months in Nepal. It's my favorite place to visit outside of the US. I've been there a couple times. I would like to go there more in the future. And Nepal is about 81% Hindu, I think, and only about 9% Buddhist, but the Buddhist communities are largely in the mountains, in the Himalayas, and so you will be trekking through the Himalayas, and you'll see stupas and prayer wheels, walls of prayer wheels, and as you walk along the wall, you run your hand along the wheels and you spin them all as you walk past. Prayer flags, all of that good stuff. So this is fun. This is kind of a reminder of one of my favorite places in the world. And I'm just like a mile or so down the road from that big stupa. And as I was driving there, I passed this little trailhead. So this area kind of abuts National Forest of the mountains here. And this is a trailhead that'll take you up into the mountains. But there's also a little, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but back over here, there are some prayer flags and a little grotto sort of thing down by the creek. So let's go check it out. Wow, another beautiful mix of the natural and the divine. We have a little shrine right here. It says, "Respect water." And we have an idyllic little creek. And I just realized there's a little plaque next to the shrine. It says, "The Naga Shrine is a half-human, half-serpent dwelling place. Nagas represent the spiritual protection of the sacredness of wealth as carried by water. As water is essential for all life on earth, may this place generate awareness and wise use of this resource." As I was driving around this morning, I saw other places like this, and for other religions too. Again, here there's a Hindu temple, there's a Zen center, various New Age buildings and centers, obviously many Tibetan Buddhism related sites. And we're gonna explore a little bit of that. So I think my plan is to just kind of drive around the area, look for interesting stuff, play some music over it, and show it to you. So let's get back in the car and hit the road and explore this area a little bit more. That was so much fun, guys. That was so interesting. I hope you enjoyed that. So I ended up going to several Tibetan Buddhist sites, the stupas and the shrines and everything, and then I went to the Hindu ashram and temple, and that was very interesting too. All the other spots up there were either closed or you have to plan ahead of time to take a tour, and I didn't do that. So still, I had a great time. I've never experienced anything like that outside of Nepal. Like, I really felt like I was back in Nepal. This is a unique spot for sure in the Western US. And everything that we saw, everything that I just showed you, was in the Baca Grande community area. Interestingly, that's not really a town, it's just a community, and it's basically run, that community is basically run by the Homeowners Association, except in this case it is the Property Owners Association. It's the POA instead of the HOA. And so they're in charge of things like road maintenance, and then, you know, parks, and like the local firefighting force, stuff like that. And I believe it costs around $600 a year in POA fees, and you have to pay that whether you have a big, you know, 10-bedroom mansion on 100 acres of land, or if you have just a quarter-acre empty lot. And within the Baca Grande community, there are sort of these sub-communities, and there's some that are full of just kind of what we would think of as normal houses. There's some that are mostly for manufactured houses. There's some for alternative and off-grid houses. Like today I saw all kinds of earth ships, and I saw this one house that was like several silos combined to form a sort of castle. I saw this really cool kind of circular spiral building, just a very interesting place. And apparently the community of the Baca Grande wants to become a town. And I read a really interesting article last night, and it was called something like, "How do you start a town?" or "How do you become a town?" These Colorado residents want to find out. I'll put a link to that article down below if you want to learn more about this area and about the community of the Baca Grande. And I'm now in the town of Crestone, and there's not really much here. I think the population of this town is like 100 and something people, whereas the Baca Grande is like 1,200 or something like that. And so I'll show you guys around town a little bit. Again, there's not really much to show you, but if you just want to see what this town is like, we're about to find out. We have a brew pub over on this corner, and the wind is very strong right now, and a credit union right there. I'm not sure what this building is right there, but look at that view. Man, that is something you would never get tired of. And then a post office. And being so close to the mountains, there are obviously lots of trails in the area you can reach pretty close to town. We have some interesting little artsy looking buildings. There's an apothecary right there. We have a place for spiritual supplies and services. We have some older buildings like this here hardware store and the old cabin next to it. And then there's this place, the Elephant Cloud Market, that also has a cafe in it. And there's a gas pump out front. And that's about it. That's Crestone. I mentioned earlier that there are trails around here, and I think I'm gonna hike one of those trails. I hadn't really planned on doing this today, but I feel like stretching my legs a little bit. So let me hop in the car, get on my phone, do some research, figure out what's around here, and we'll hit the trail. I think I found just the ticket for our hike. We're about 15 minutes away from Crestone, the town we were just in, and this trail is called the San Isabel Trail. Here's the little trailhead. This trail is also called the San Isabel Lake Trail because it ultimately leads to a lake in about 5.5 miles. So right now we are here. The lake is up here, and the trail goes through the canyon alongside the creek to get up there. I'm only gonna go a mile or two up the canyon here. Basically, I wanted to see some water, and I saw that this trail follows a creek and that there's some little waterfalls along the way, just like little things, and then there's some creek crossings, so I thought it would be a nice contrast to sort of the high desert that is most of what's in this area. It's nice to have water in the desert occasionally. That was a very pleasant, very enjoyable little hike. I hiked for about an hour. I went 1.5 miles up the canyon, and then the snow just got to be too deep. I got tired of trudging through snow, of sinking deep into the snow, so I turned around. But lots of stream crossings, lots of nice little pools, good cliffs. It was just a very scenic spot. I'd like to come back and do the whole hike up to the lake and then up to the mountains. The mountains here see a fair amount of traffic, but the ones that see the most by far are the 14ers. So there are 14,000 foot peaks in this area. And by comparison, trailheads like this that don't lead to 14ers are far, far, far less frequently used. So now I'm sitting on a little ridge above my campsite. I'm, I don't know, like 1 mile, maybe even less than 1 mile from the trailhead. As I was driving to the trailhead earlier, I passed just a ton of campsites, and I picked one, so let me go show it to you. Here's a look at it from the ridge. The main dirt road that leads to the trailhead is right here. The trailhead is off in this direction. There's the Land Cruiser, and the forest continues on down into the valley and then kind of abruptly stops out here. So that's the rest of the San Luis Valley. And here's the view from ground level. I'm parked right there. Obviously, you could park another car right here and another one out there, or a little trailer back in here somewhere. There are a couple of fire rings. There's one right there in front of the car, and then another one over here behind the car. I'm happy with this spot. It's quiet. I like that I can see the snow-capped mountains poking through between the trees here, and I'm looking forward to relaxing for a few hours this afternoon and having a good night's sleep tonight and waking up early tomorrow and doing it all over again. Got lots more adventures planned. But what did you think of today's adventures? It was something a little bit different for the channel, but I think that makes sense because it's something that's a little bit different in this area. And I really enjoyed going to all those religious and spiritual sites. I hope you guys did too. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your favorite part was. Let me know if you have any questions. And I'll see you in the next one. Be sure to check out Adventure Know-How, my new site, where you can gain access to a map of all of my free campsites, plus monthly bonus videos that you won't find anywhere else. Learn more at adventureknowhow.com. And for links to everything else SUV RVing related, visit suvrving.com. Links to these sites and more will be in the video description.